Welcome to Think New Mexico. We're in Santa Fe and we're with Mandi Torrez. She's Think New Mexico's Education Reform Director. Mm-hmm. Okay, Mandi, when I say that, I'm seeing this mountain.
It's a pretty tall mountain.
It's a big mountain. Mandi, you've had some special awards. You were the 2020 New Mexico Teacher of the Year. That's super cool.
Yes, certainly very cool. And that program has been around since I think like 1954. So a lot of great teachers have gone through that program, and it was really about the professional development, getting to meet teachers from all over the country. It really is a national program, and getting to go to the White House and talking with Joe Biden and President Biden showed up. We thought he wasn't going to be there, but he showed up. But anyway, it was just a really great experience. It was just additional professional development to help teacher leaders become even better teacher leaders.
So again, back to the mountain, education reform. Do you know the great teachers throughout New Mexico? You've just mentioned that you've met a lot of them.
Right.
Does it bother you when you hear about the statistics on New Mexico education, fourth grade reading levels, eighth grade math scores? Is this mountain too big for us to solve?
I don't think it's ever too big to solve. And do the statistics bother me? Yes. Those things keep me up at night, not only because I'm passionate about education, because my daughters are currently going through our public education system. And so, I see the shortfalls and I see things that I want to be better for them. And so that's really what sort of keeps me going and climbing that mountain. And we're getting some footholds. That's the good news. But it is a long climb up, but we're headed in the right direction.
I personally get upset when I hear people talk about, we've improved education in New Mexico. This would be over like the last 5 or 6 years. We're now 49th instead of 50, and it used to be neck and neck with Mississippi. Yeah. What's interesting is Mississippi has adopted some structure for their education system, I guess, from Florida. Perfect. And you probably know, because of your research, all the different states that are having success with various things. Mm-hmm. Are we resistant as a state to making those changes and those reforms, or do they just take longer to implement than we think?
I think they take longer. And, Dr. Carrie Wright, who was the Secretary of Education in Mississippi, actually came to New Mexico this month in May and was talking about all the great things that they were doing. And, she called it the Mississippi Marathon, right? That it wasn't going to happen overnight, that it took a lot of thinking and planning and really years to get those results. And she was there, I think, for 12 or 13 years in Mississippi. Now she's trying to do the same thing over in Maryland. But she really talked about, the message that I took from her is that she really was thoughtful in the quality of everything they were doing. They weren't just rushing to implement things quickly. They did it. They made sure they were doing it well. And one of the examples that she gave that really helped raise their reading scores was they hired coaches, literacy coaches. So these are people, experts who would go into classrooms, really help teachers figure out, what they needed to be doing in their classroom, how to best work with kids on certain reading techniques. You probably heard about the science of reading. That's been a big thing across the whole nation. And, they really jumped into that and had these literacy coaches there helping the teachers. And one thing that was very interesting is she said they had about 150 applicants for these coaching positions. And she said she hired 25. So she really just took the cream of the crop. And even though they only started with 25, they took those 25 who she thought were just the experts that were needed. And then they started to grow more. But they really just focused on, we're not just going to rush into things. We're going to keep it quality and we're going to do it right. And so I think that's one really important lesson that New Mexico can learn from Mississippi.
What are the obstacles to improving education in New Mexico?
People will tell you different things. You talk to 10 different people, you'll probably get 10 different answers. Coming from my perspective, where I was in the classroom for a decade and seeing everything that was happening, I think there's two big factors, and they are the two biggest in-school factors that affect students. And one, that's the quality of the teacher, and two, it's the quality of the principal. And so the quality of the teacher, right? They're in front of the kids every single day. And one of the frustrations I think that you heard in this last session, and not just this last session, but there's been a lot of conversations about it. And to their credit, the colleges of education are listening, and they're working with state leaders and state legislators to get things right.
Are there initiatives that you're currently working on to improve teachers?
Yes, so that's one of the things. So we pushed for the colleges of education to ensure that they're teaching the science of reading, what they did in Mississippi. And so, thanks to leaders like Mimi Stewart, that got through this year. So, our colleges of ed will be required to teach that. Now, what's happened before is there was some of it happening, just not to the level of what it needed to be happening. And so Senator Stewart really pushed for legislation for all teachers to get trained. This is after they already have their teacher's license. Some of them have been in front of students for, a couple of decades. And now they're getting this training that a lot of people and a lot of the teachers ask, well, why didn't we get this training when we were learning to become teachers? And so, we're spending about $20 million a year to train our teachers to get this reading, so that they can be the best reading teachers that we need them to be. And so that's one of the things that's sort of slow going forward. Did we have the trainers to be able to train our teachers? So it really started with like special education teachers and kindergarten teachers, and we've sort of added different levels as we've gone on. And we're even going to train our middle school and high school teachers about how to help kids with reading. So we're definitely moving in the right direction for that, but it is one of those slow moving trains that, that it's going to be a little bit for the results. But also on that side, I think we didn't quite get the coaching right like Mississippi did. We didn't quite have that level of expertise in those coaches that we had. I think the pay was part of the reason, the pay that we wanted to pay those coaches. They could make more money staying in the classroom, so why would they want to take a pay cut to do this important work? But hopefully we'll move that in the right direction too, because that coaching is such an important piece.
How are teachers treated as employees around the state? Is it a good vocation, a good way to make a living for your family?
I think it depends on who you ask. As I said, the number 2 factor was principals. So just like our teacher training, our principal training is not ideal in the way we go about training our school administrators. Now we did pass a law this year that would sort of change that would have different licensure tiers for different administrative level tiers. And within those, they get different types of training. So, if you're going to start out as an assistant principal, that's great. You're going to get this training. If you want to move up to the next level, then you're going to get different training. There's different training for superintendents. So again, that's going to take some time as our colleges of ed figure out what do those training programs look like.
Is there any pushback? And I'm going to use you as an example. Mm-hmm. So you got your degree in education. I know you have a journalism background as well. Mm-hmm. Would you have pushed back on additional training, or you're the kind of person that loves all the training you could get?
I loved all the training I could get. Unfortunately, that's another issue we have, is the quality of the professional development that's been available. And you talk to any teacher, I'm sure you can find very many who wouldn't agree with this. But so the beginning of the year, before we start school, we have what are called in-service days, and part of that is professional development. I never once had one that I thought was effective in those few days coming up to before you start school. I felt like we always could have used our time much better, planning, looking at student records, figuring out where they needed help and things like that. So I think a lot of teachers would tell you that their professional development that they're forced to take is a waste of time, that it's not quality. So we've got to do better there too, not just in the training of when you're becoming a teacher, but we've got to have that support all the way along through our career, because, your first year of teaching, you get better and better as you go. And if you don't have that quality professional development and the support, then that makes it really hard. And I think that's where coaches come in. Like, teachers need that coaching. Every single teacher, I think, could benefit from coaching. When you have those experts in your classroom helping you every day, and it's sustained, it's not just 2 days of this math professional development and then we're sending you on your way and you never hear about it again.
Yes.
That's not going to help our students. So that training is definitely important, both for principals and teachers.
And it sounds like to me, most of us are used to trying to keep ourselves in shape. You can't go to the gym once a year and be in shape.
Exactly. That's a great analogy.
I think you're kind of alluding to, this kind of needs to be ongoing, and
Exactly.
you're getting reps. Plus, you're in the classroom.
Yeah.
Is it? Are there incentives for a teacher? And I'm thinking about you in a third grade classroom, and you run across a situation. Maybe it's a child has a family situation, but there's emotional issues and things. Is there a way for you to go to your peers at the school and say, I was faced with this problem, what do you guys think? Is that, do teachers work together that way?
When your school is functioning well, yes, that is how it should work. We have something called, and we refer to them as PLCs, Professional Learning Communities. And that is what is supposed to happen. You're supposed to take, you're supposed to take issues that you're having in your class with students, and you can't figure them out. You take them to a team and you all work through them and you figure out how to help those students who are struggling. That's the ideal situation. In some schools that happens. In a lot of schools that doesn't happen. A lot of schools, they try, but they don't really know how to structure a PLC. They haven't had the training on it. Other times there's good intentions, but then you have to have things like IEP meetings for special education students, or 504 meetings, and all of these other things that come up, and you get pulled out of that PLC, or you lose that prep time or whatever to do all of these other things that are also required of teachers, and all the paperwork and those things. And so oftentimes those PLCs will kind of fall to the side in some situations. But in a school that's functioning well, yes, that is what should be happening.
I've written down quality of teachers, quality of principals as two overriding things. This is not on the list, but I'm thinking in my mind, I think most cities in New Mexico, or at least the larger cities, have charter schools. Maybe like APS has APS charter schools, and there are state charter schools that are in Albuquerque, just as an example.
Yeah.
Almost without exception, those charter schools have higher test scores than
I
the
wouldn't
public
say
schools.
almost without exception.
No? Okay.
I think you have some charters that are doing very well, and I think you have some charters that are struggling.
And here's my question. The good ideas, why is it so hard to see a school successful and adopt what they're doing? And it might be the very problem you're saying. Maybe the charter schools are attracting better teachers. I don't know. It's just a theory.
I mean, it's possible. I think charter schools, a lot of them will tend to pay more. So that is a draw for some teachers. Some of it is the innovation. I mean, the whole idea of charters was that for them to push the boundaries and do something more innovative and figure out what works. And there are some schools that are doing that. They're doing things differently than what we've done in traditional schools. There are some charters that aren't really pushing those boundaries and haven't figured out how to do things differently. And so again, I really think it goes back to those school leaders. When you have a good school leader, it doesn't matter if you're in a charter school or a regular public school, that school is going to thrive. And so, some of those charters, you do have those educators who are very passionate and very committed and who want to do everything they can right by students. And so they're making those schools work. But we have to have that in every school. And I think if you had that in every school, then we would see more results and more student scores and more success.
What are you working on now with Think New Mexico for initiatives for next legislative session? Fred Nathan indicated we might have a special session, but that might be more directed to healthcare. And I kind of want people to understand that are watching, don't wait till next January till legislative session starts to get educated about things that you're concerned about. Because part of what you're doing at Think New Mexico is putting out information at thinknewmexico.org, and you want voters to read it, and you want policymakers to read it, and you want voters to contact their representatives. So tell us some of the things you're working on.
So right now, I mean, people think that the session is the big time, but actually right now, the work is going on right now in the interim sessions. The education committee, of course, they meet monthly. So definitely being involved and paying attention to what's going on those, because that's really going to dictate what happens in the session. They're studying issues, they're looking at issues, they're looking at budgets. So all of the important work is happening now.
Who makes, and I'm not asking for individual names, but are legislators the one that make up the education committee?
Yes, so there's the Legislative Education Study Committee, and you have voting members and non-voting members, but they're all legislators.
Okay.
The LESC does have a
But
staff.
they're putting in, again, we have a volunteer legislature.
Right.
So I want our viewers to know these people are putting in hours, they're putting in time trying to figure out. And you're not trying to persuade them, but you're trying to provide data and information and policy.
Sure.
And does that, have you seen them take that and run with it and do well with it?
It depends. I mean, they sort of have their own ideas. They don't always like the ideas that we bring to the table. But, one of the things that we are working on, and it goes back to the teacher quality, and this is a collaborative effort. And I think we're calling ourselves now the New Mexico Alliance for Teacher Residencies. I think that's what we came up with. But it's a few education groups coming up with this idea of teacher residencies. So on the discussion on teacher quality, so there came a point when we were sort of panicked that we needed, especially around COVID, that we needed more teachers. We needed more teachers in the classroom. So what happened, and some other states did this too, we weren't alone in this, but we opened up a pathway into teaching called alternative licensure. So what happens in alternative licensure is if you have a college degree, it doesn't matter what you had your college degree in, you can sign up to become a teacher. You can start in a classroom without having had any kind of training to be a teacher. Now, some people, have some natural abilities, and that's great, but teaching is hard, and it is not for everybody. And to go in without any kind of training makes it really difficult. And so we're losing a lot of those teachers early because it's hard. They're having to figure it out. You're building the plane while you're flying it, I guess is the analogy. And so that's one of the issues that we've had with teacher quality is I believe it's like 57% of our new teachers are coming this route. And so what our group is working on is a teacher residency. So much like you would think as a doctor goes through a residency, right? It's hands-on, you're in the operating room, you're in the clinic, that you're doing the work. And so that's really what we're pushing for on these teacher residencies.
But you kind of have somebody that really knows what they're doing.
You have somebody who's guiding you. Exactly.
Yeah.
You have it, but I guess you could call them like a master teacher. They're helping you along the way. You're not the teacher of record, whereas alternative license, you're like, you are the teacher of record. You're responsible for everything. You're not just learning. And so we're really pushing for that teacher residency and trying to incentivize it, because right now, and New Mexico is leading on these teacher residencies. We are, other states are looking to us as a model for this. But how it works is...
I do want to have you restate that, because you're talking about New Mexico leading something that's positive.
Right, and you don't hear enough about that.
Please state that again.
Yes, you don't hear enough about that. These other states are looking to us for a few things, and residencies is one of them. And so what happens is you sign up, these residents receive a $35,000 stipend, so they're getting paid to do this work. And they do the work, they put in their year, and then they can become the teacher of record the next year. $35,000. So if you're coming through the alternative licensure pathway, right now you start at level 1 pay, which the legislature just increased that. So you're starting at $55,000. So if you're coming to want to be a teacher, do you want to start at $55,000 with benefits, or do you want to start with just a $35,000 stipend? Yeah. And so our group is working on leveling that playing field so that we're incentivizing, they're equal, the pay is equal, the benefits are equal. So which route are you going to choose? You're going to choose the hard route that's probably going to have you out of the classroom in 2 to 3 years, or you're going to choose this other route where you get good training and you can see exactly what it is to be a teacher, what's expected of you, And so we really want to incentivize this other better teacher residency route.
Does New Mexico still have a shortage of teachers?
We do, and we've had that for a while now, and I don't know that that's going to go away. As I said, teaching is hard, and and it gets a lot of negative press.
Are smaller communities struggling to find teachers, or larger?
Oh,
communities?
for sure, yeah. Okay. Our rural, it's definitely our rural districts will try to incentivize things. I know there was a lot of pushback on the governor tried to institute a 180-day rule, which wouldn't have allowed 4-day weeks in the rural areas. And they say, hey, that's how we recruit our teachers. They get a 3-day weekend. Doesn't that sound pretty good?
Yeah.
So that was one of their recruiting tools. So that was why you saw one reason why you saw some pushback. Well,
I have noticed, I do quite a bit of driving through Gallup. Both on the radio and in some of their billboards and stuff, they're really pushing to hire teachers in that area. And it looks like the salaries and everything are a little bit higher than you would find even in an Albuquerque or somewhere like that. Sure,
yeah, and they do that. I know, like Bernalillo Public Schools. I mean, they're not rural, but they're competing with the Albuquerque and Rio Rancho. And I think like last year, maybe the year before, they were paying level 3 teachers $85,000. They wanted those level 3 teachers to come into their district, so they were willing to pay that salary. Of course, what's mandated is just the minimums.
Sure.
So they can pay what they want to pay. But we have to change, and that's one of the other issues that we've been working on is class size. So how are we going to get new teachers? People don't want to become teachers because they see how hard it is. Their kids in the classroom, they're just coming from, a situation where maybe they had 40 kids in their math class because we definitely have a shortage of math and science teachers.
Mandi, you say it's hard. I want to know if it's hard. I'm going to joke. I come from a basketball coaching background. Mm-hmm. I was joking around with Marcus because he was involved with the basketball program at St. Mike's.
Yeah.
Is it hard because of the parents? Or is it hard because of the students?
It's hard for a lot of different reasons. I think it's all of those things. In some situations, maybe it is a lack of parent support or a lack of parent communication. In some situations, it is the behavior. I think the behavior of our kids changed dramatically after COVID. Not only were they behind socially, but man, I would just hear some of my teacher friends being like, I have this kid who's stabbing me with the pencil,
wow.
And they're just saying, we're seeing these behaviors that we've never seen before. And so when you're coupling all of these things and behaviors and large class sizes, it's burning our teachers out. And not only that, but we're asking them to do all of these other things, right? Teachers wear so many hats. And then we don't give them enough planning time and things like that. That's what makes it hard. It's just, and it's different from every year. Every year is different. I don't think I ever had a year where I felt like everything went the same because your kids are different, the parents are different, and you have to adjust to all those things.
What's the pushback from political leadership on either passing or getting rid of some of these initiatives that you're proposing? What's the pushback?
There really hasn't been a pushback on the residencies. They've been funding it for a while now, state funding, and we're trying to look at, sustainable funding for it. Mm-hmm. So they have been supportive of the residencies. We just have sort of had to learn as we went, like what needed to be fixed,
Gotcha.
That sort of thing. So the residencies, that really hasn't been much of an issue. We've run into a lot of barriers on class size. One, because people think it's going to be very expensive. Now, we started out, when we first started, I think it's been about 3 years ago, we did try to make this K-12. And this is what New York did a couple of years ago. New York public schools did this, New York City. And they did go K-12. They capped their high school classes at 25.
Wow.
Now, they probably don't have the teacher shortage that we have. We found out very quickly that wasn't going to work here in New Mexico because we don't have the math and science teachers at those levels. And so we came back the next year and we said, okay, well, let's just try K-6. Let's just work on those classes and then we'll show that it's working. And then maybe eventually we can go back up to high school once we work on our teacher pipeline. Well, that didn't go well either. People said, well, it's too expensive when we don't have the teachers. So we came back this year at K-3. And our thinking really was, a lot of people don't understand, we've done all this work on early childhood, but early childhood isn't just pre-K. Early childhood goes all the way up to age 8, which is 3rd grade. And so we said, okay, let's really run with this early childhood education. And the second piece is to that is there is so much research, and it's really quite sad that if you're not reading by 3rd grade, which is why there's a big push, like you're less likely to graduate from high school, you're less likely to go to college, you're more likely to be incarcerated, like all of these horrible things that people don't like to hear, but that are reality. And I don't know if it's myth or legend. I remember in college us having a discussion about how some cities were using 3rd grade math and reading scores to plan for their future prison populations. Anyway, so we said, we're spending all this money on the backside. Okay, our kids aren't reading by 3rd grade. We've got to do the high dosage tutoring. We've got to do all the special services, and all this money is being spent after the fact. Well, how about we just move that money and resources over to the other side of that 3rd grade and make sure that they are reading, that we are giving them every chance to be reading by 3rd grade. And of course, teachers are in support of the smaller class sizes. And so we really said, well, okay, we want to cap class sizes at 20 kids. And the pushback again is we don't have the teachers, and then the money to hire the teachers. And then, some schools might need a new building or a portable because they don't have the space. So those are the biggest barriers that we've heard. We can't do much about the space, but our also argument is that, well, you're never going to get more teachers if you don't change their working conditions.
Yes.
If you don't make their lives easier so that they can focus on the kids. And so you've got to start somewhere if you want to get more teachers, and working conditions are at the top of the list.
As a teacher, when you were a teacher, would it be helpful if you had parents, and I understand there's things they have to do, background checks and other things to help in the classroom, but when you have a team of volunteers helping you grade papers and do things like that, does that make working conditions better for teachers?
It depends. If I'm not grading the papers, then I don't know how the kids are doing.
There you go. Yeah.
So having someone to grade papers, sometimes I guess that can be helpful if it's something that's not super important that, you're not really paying that much attention to. And sometimes managing another adult in the room can be harder too. But it does work out because kids need small group. They need to be in small groups working on things, and it makes it easier when you have somebody else in the classroom to do that type of
I was just trying to think of a way to not make that an economic burden. And to get, I think that there's a lot of people, especially in my age group, I'm 67, that might enjoy that on a regular basis, and having those relationships and helping. I know some retired engineers that would, men and women that would really love to do that. So just an idea. But Mandi, all the things that you're working on, I'm glad you started with I think we can solve the problems. The mountain's not too high, but it is going to take a lot of work. And we thank you for talking with us. What I appreciate most today is to understand the thought process that you've communicated to us. We tried this, that didn't work. Now we're trying this. And so it's very logical, and it's moving forward. And so thanks for those efforts.
Yeah, thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you.